Can you tell us a little bit about HEAP?
HEAT is a new initiative by the Hedera ecosystem. Enterprise delivery is hard. I've been doing it for decades, and getting as far as a proof of concept is actually relatively easy, but getting that final mile, moving from POC to pilot to production and scale, is the hard part. That move from kind of the innovation labs that are doing the proof of concept into the business is probably the biggest hurdle.
Looking ahead, Rob, what does the future of enterprise adoption on Hedera look like?
I think we are going to be very surprised over the course of the next year that a true adoption happens.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lorena Nessi from CCN, and today I'm joined by Rob Allen, Director of Hedera Enterprise Adoption at Hashgraph. We will discuss the launch of the Hedera Enterprise Adoption Team, HEAT, how enterprises move from pilots to real deployments, the role of decentralization in large-scale systems, and the main challenges. Rob, thank you so much for being with us today, this morning in Australia.
My pleasure, Lorena. Very nice to be here.
Thank you. So shall we start with HEAT? Can you tell us a little bit about HEAT? What gaps does it aim to fill in Hedera's enterprise adoption efforts? And do you think it has lived up to that so far?
Well, HEAT is a new initiative by the Hedera ecosystem, which seeks to address some of the challenges that we had previously seen in getting enterprise DLT solutions all the way into production. So over the last few years, Hedera council members have run many proofs of concept, and some have got to production, some have got to production scale, but generally they kind of peter out at the proof of concept stage. Enterprise delivery is hard. I've been doing it for decades, and getting as far as a proof of concept is actually relatively easy, but getting that final mile, moving from POC to pilot to production and scale, is the hard part, because you're not necessarily focusing on the functional requirements of the technology. You need to navigate enterprise departments, you need executive sponsorship, you need funding, so it needs to be in someone's budget. Plus, now, of course, we have many kind of cybersecurity hoops to jump through, which tend not to be prioritized in proofs of concept. So that move from kind of the innovation labs that are doing the proof of concept into the business is probably the biggest hurdle. So what we're seeking to do with HEAT, which stands for the Hedera Enterprise Adoption Team, is to address that challenge for our council members. Previously, because we are a decentralized network, we have a labs team in the Hashgraph business. We have the council, which is a separate LLC. We have a foundation which provides grant funding and ecosystem integrations and liquidity and business development for the network. And other organizations such as the Swiss Hashgraph Association, which provide development resources and do their own kind of engagements with both enterprise and startups. So coordinating all of these pieces, where without controlling them, because of course we decentralized, had been the challenge previously. But with this new administration in the US, we have a lot more opportunity. The risk posture is a lot lower now for this kind of level of coordination. So what I do with my team is provide a kind of professional services service to our council members. So helping them validate the architecture, the design, helping them find the right delivery partners, and also helping them navigate their own internal stakeholders. I've got many years experience at PwC, so it's kind of second nature to me to do it. But now I'm doing it on behalf of the Hedera Council.
Brilliant. So you have mentioned that the failure rate is high and many pilots actually don't come into real cases. What do you think that says about the industry readiness versus Hedera's readiness as a project?
So I Hedera is ready, and it has been, and we've seen some amazing real world use cases that are operating in production. So Mondelez, the world's biggest consumer packaged goods company, are currently using Hedera for a couple of use cases. We've got Aberdeen, the largest UK asset under management business, tokenizing funds, and they've recently worked with Lloyds Bank on another project. So, and then we've had products like Avery Dennison's Atma.io, which for a while drove thousands of transactions a second, which was far beyond any other blockchain technology's ability to kind of keep up. Ultimately, that didn't find product market fit, and that's kind of where I'm coming. You've got the startup mantra is to get MVP into people's hands, users' hands as early as possible, and then have a tight feedback loop. So getting that final mile, so we have an MVP, and we can work out the course correction or the pivots that need to be adjusted while we're finding that product market fit is key. And of course, it's part of their business strategies as well. We've got 32 of the world's biggest companies on the council, across geographies, across sectors, and they have very different internal organizations and that need to be navigated and pushed forward. So there won't be a one-size-fits-all approach here, but that's why we have to kind of offer a kind of professional service to help them, and also educate. I mean, there's always a continuous education process here. A lot of enterprise decision makers still have rather an old attitude towards blockchain, and AI has certainly kind of sucked a lot of the wind out of the sails of blockchain. So there are challenges here, but we're very optimistic that there are many use case types or categories where Hedera not only excels, is streets ahead of the other blockchains' ability to deliver, because Hedera has this super low cost, very very fast to times to settlement, and doesn't have an environmental impact either, unlike some consensus methodologies on other chains. So there is a very compelling reason to build on Hedera. We're seeing a lot in the AI space now kind of materializing, because agentic AI and agentic commerce and agentic payments requires a trust layer, not only for the provenance of the data that your businesses are relying upon. So there's a very good organization called Equity Labs that just announced their partnership with Accenture, and they're going to market together. They've built firmware for the likes of NVIDIA and Intel chips, which addresses that provenance problem. But there are also the agent economy that's now emerging needs a way of making payments, or actually interagent payments at a micro level. And Micropayments was how I came into Hedera in the first place in 2017. So I think it's taken a while to get to use cases where micropayments really actually make a difference.
Well, 2017 sounds actually not that far, really. But in the world of cryptocurrency and blockchain and all of these different technologies, yes, it is a long time, probably.
It's an eternity.
Yeah, it is. So which part of the technical architecture actually creates, you think, the most friction when enterprises try to deploy on Hedera? And how do you actually push those teams to face issues that probably they would rather ignore?
I think for enterprise, we have a growing set of use cases that are very useful to them. I mean, they're like I said, they've been proven in terms of POCs. There are lots of examples for things like cross-border payments and stablecoins that are compelling. However, enterprises still have a duty of privacy over the data that's being shared. There are many use cases that can't be run on a public network because it's in the clear, right? You can encrypt the data, but you're still seeing movement of transactions. One of the sticking points has been this ability to maintain privacy without going to a layer 2, or layer 2s are generally a compromise on the layer 1's kind of failings or constraints. And so enterprise, in my view and my experience, aren't willing to make that compromise because you don't know where the validators are, you don't know where the transactions are being sent, and if you're a regulated business, then you absolutely need to know that. So that's a point of friction as well. So when when Hedera and the Hashgraph business kind of considered that problem to be solved, they developed HashSphere. So HashSphere is a private version of Hedera, and I'm sure Hedera is now fully open sourced through the Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust project. So and the only layer 1 that's done that, I believe. So we've got this kind of perfect triumvirate of things where we've got a fully open source stack. So we're getting open source kind of and Linux Foundation developers contribute to the development of that stack. We've got the Hedera network, which is the part of the network, the public network that the Hedera Council govern. And then we've got a private instance, which is exactly the same, but deployed into this kind of into private networks. And the interoperability then becomes the challenge, right? So, then you've got this hybrid architecture where you can keep private in private network, and, where things like stablecoins live in the wild and on the public chains, they can exist there as well with exactly the same stack. And this is something we've done with Australian Payments Plus. They're a council member. I've been working with them over the last year. And Project Acacia is the Reserve Bank of Australia's tokenization project this year. And what Australian Payments Plus did was create a private network using HashSphere, deployed CBDCs into there because it was a requirement from the Reserve Bank of Australia that they shouldn't go onto a public network. But we are operating a token interchange, so a stablecoin interchange for members of our scheme. And those stablecoins, or the settlement asset there, is collateralized by the CBDC. So we needed this interoperability aspect, and it's working perfectly. So I think we're still kind of developing those architectures, and we're learning from the use cases. But I'm pretty confident that some of the inhibitors to kind of progress that we'd seen in the past, where Hyperledger Fabric or IBM Blockchain, for example, were selected to address this problem, but built a walled garden. They go away now because this is this go-to-market with the ability to have a hybrid structure is really, really important. They could even start in the private network and then get comfortable there, and then for use cases that need the public can advance into the public space. So it's a really good and probably unique in this space approach to enterprise, and Hedera is enterprise first. So it's not a surprise that we've got to this point.
Brilliant. So you work with a council with all of these members, but how do you actually stop a council member from building something that serves their company or their own interests, but adds actually nothing to the network? How do you negotiate that?
Well, we don't. I mean, it's a public network, and anyone should build on it in any way that they see fit. We tend not to see that, but it is possible, and I don't think that we should be stopping any council member using the network whatsoever. We have these forums, we have these committees where best practice is discussed. I chair a committee called the Network Utilization Committee, or USECOM, and we do exactly that. We share notes on architecture or use cases or best practice or lessons learned within that forum, and hopefully share those experiences and things not to do as well. And then Heat provides the kind of independent validation. So if we were asked to kind of come in and validate an architecture, then I would reach out into the various organizations and get the most appropriate person or people to come and help that council member move forward. Usually they do a proof of concept, and then we would come in and validate that and help them kind of learn those lessons and then move forward again.
Brilliant. And what evidence do you actually require before accepting that an enterprise deployment is a real transformation and actually not just corporate narrative, but actually using the network for something that will make a change?
So this is one of the new, I'm not saying that it hasn't happened previously, but one of the things that we will be responsible within Heat is conducting proper value assessments. So, we've moved beyond, like I keep saying, the proofs of concept. We've got to create real value for the council member or the enterprise, and real value for the Hedera network. And we're kind of developing capability. We're kind of building up the stack, if you like, away from the base layer to help council members initially with common use cases. I'm a payments guy, so I'm very interested in things like cross-border payments or accounts payable and receivable, corporate cash management, treasury management. So those sorts of things every business, every enterprise has, and we're focusing on not just that, but also the other core themes that we excel at. So payments and stablecoins, real-world asset tokens, so DVP or settlement between one and the other. ESG, so sustainability is, no other network even comes close to the investment and the outcomes that we've built around sustainability and ESG, because we're a carbon negative network. So that's the best platform on which to build these things. And just had a couple of great announcements at COP30 as well in Brazil. So these are, and I've already talked about the AI pillar as well. So the 4 pillars of stablecoins, real world assets, ESG, and AI provenance are really the core pillars around which we will build kind of business units, I guess, or new capability or product where true value can be identified. So we'll do a value assessment on the projects before they get moving. Some of these projects get grant funding as well from Foundation or the Hashgraph Association. So there's and at the very least we'll be providing free resource or resource from across our ecosystem to support and help that project be successful. So in order to adopt or rather deploy that investment from the Hedera ecosystem side, we need to be reassured that there is true value in those outcomes, both for the council member and for us.
Will those ISO 2022 actually play a meaningful role in Hedera deployment today? And do you think the industry is overstating its relevance just because it is the 2022 mandate?
I do think it's overstated. There was a time a year or two ago where there were all these 20022 compliant chains, and there was a whole narrative around which ones were compliant and which ones were not. ISO 20022 is just a messaging layer. It's a messaging standard and a registry that enables, in particular, payments networks to communicate, or payment network participants to communicate in a standard way. So there is no compliancy required of a blockchain or a DLT if it can carry an ISO 20022 message as a payload. And that might be, like any other data payload. I mean, it's effectively XML, so that's is how it would operate. So you'd have an application layer that sits on top of the network that communicates using ISO 20022 messaging, and would presumably log or tokenize on the base layer for the purposes of that use case. So there are benefits of a network such as Hedera, because you know where the validator nodes are. So, the kind of a side requirement of ISO 20022 is, SOC 2 compliance, and, the fact that it's communication between regulated entities. And so knowing where the validators are is usually part of the set of non-functional requirements of the network. So, Hedera obviously has that covered. But the ISO 20022 compliance kind of narrative is a little bit misinterpreted usually. I've actually built payment systems in Europe. So the SEPA, the Single European Payment Area, was one of the first payment systems that was based on ISO 20022. So I worked for Barclays Bank over 10 years, 15 years ago actually, implementing their SEPA solutions. And that was all ISO 20022. Here in Australia, our faster payments, or what we call our MPP, account to account system, is 20022 as well. So it's been around a while, and I think the adoption within DLT-based use cases of ISO 20022 will just be at that application layer.
Okay, so can you point to a Hedera deployment where ISO 2022 was genuinely required for integration with banking rates, or was just a matter of compliance?
No, I'm not aware of one, because stablecoins, don't necessarily have, and the stablecoins are next generation payments. It's digital money on public networks. So there are use cases where you integrate the two. One of our Project Acacia projects for Australian Payments Plus connected the new payments platform, our ISO 20022 traditional payments network, with public networks that operate with stablecoins. So that interface, the on-ramping and off-ramping of stablecoins into the traditional payment system, requires a level of translation at the interface there. So I think that's probably where we'll see some of this happening. I think the ISO 20022 message is a very data-rich message format, and a lot of that data is quite valuable. So one could imagine use cases where that is tokenized and maybe referenced or connected to the stablecoin or the tokenized deposit, or even tokenized money market funds are going to be new forms of digital money. So, I wouldn't rule that out at all.
Brilliant. Looking ahead, Rob, what does the future of enterprise adoption on Hedera look like? And what important point have you not touched on yet?
I think we are going to be very surprised over the course of the next year of that a true adoption happens. We have many use cases. So 50 or more use cases that I've been tracking over the last couple of years, many of which have been waiting for kind of a regulatory friendly environment to deploy into. I think we're past the experimentation stage, and the fear of missing out, and the competitive nature of this space is really going to drive some of this adoption forward. I think we'll be very surprised around some of the use cases. So I mentioned agentic commerce. I think that's really going to take off, and micropayments with agentic commerce, and that trust layer I mentioned is a really key use case. What Accenture are doing in taking that Equity Labs product to market is going to be global. I'm very excited about seeing that. But there's overlaps, right? As always, I mentioned the 4 pillars, but actually the innovation happens where they intersect. So maybe our ESG and sustainability ecosystem starts generating green bonds, which can be tokenized and paid for in stablecoin. So those things are just around the corner. I think once businesses get familiar with how to use stablecoins, how to operate stablecoins, you don't even have to be an issuer. You've got to be set up to receive digital money in payment for goods and services. That's the first step. And I'll be working with all our council members just to make sure that their stablecoin strategies and their those first steps are taken, because you need wallet infrastructure, you need the appropriate integrations with internal and back-end systems, you need to know how to account for it, you need to understand the jurisdictional specifics of the where you work. So all of those things are non-technical, but they are barriers to moving forward. I think those will be cleared very soon, and then everything will take off.
So you think normally technology goes faster than regulation, right? And some of those things that you mentioned are technology-based and surely are going to be solved very quickly. At least probably more, it will happen before regulation catches up. But do you think that there's actually the right or the correct environment in regulation for these things to happen very soon?
It depends where you live or where you operate. There's already regulatory arbitrage happening between jurisdictions and between businesses that work in jurisdictions. Those jurisdictions that move slowly, and like you say, regulators never lead the innovation; they always trail it, because they're there to protect, right? And so having a regulator that actually sets the framework before there is need is very unlikely. But progressive regulators that move quickly, and we've seen the most obvious one we've seen with the SEC under the current US administration, but in the UK, MiCA in Europe, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and very soon in Australia, where we're seeing similar but not exactly the same regulatory treatment of the same assets. And I think that'll be the friction point. How businesses, who by definition these enterprises are multinational, how they set themselves up so that they don't have the friction of dealing with a progressive regulator over here and one that hasn't even started thinking about it over here. I think it'll be quite interesting to see the dynamics within the global business setup for that. Of course, there are other macro reasons for businesses to operate in different countries, and they seem to change all the time at the moment. So I don't think it's only about this, but it will increasingly be one of the factors that are considered.
Well, thank you, Rob. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I'm just I'm delighted to be here. We've got a big retail ecosystem as well. I know we've only been talking about enterprise, but we've got a very strong retail ecosystem. And I think one of the things about retail is that they are a lot more nimble and agile. And I don't. In fact, I go to them first. I go to our community first to understand the development, because it's only then that those learnings are incorporated into the enterprise solutions, and so there's some really good businesses that are emerging in the Hedera ecosystem, which I think will provide a big role to play in enterprise adoption, whether it be the setting of AI standards and agentic commerce, or our very vibrant but very non-crypto ESG ecosystem. Those kind of contribute to the richness of both our use cases and adoption. And once an enterprise has adopted, let's say, a stablecoin use case for cross-border payments, then the technology stack is mostly the same for tokenized real-world assets or carbon credits, or so they don't have to cross that bridge again once they've got to that point. And that, as I said earlier, the combination of all of these key pillars will drive a lot of very interesting change.
Yes, absolutely. Things are moving fast, aren't they? So
Indeed.
I think we will see many changes, and adoption is rapidly growing anyway. And these things, conversations like these, work as well very well, very useful for people.
I think so.
Understand and go. Brilliant, Rob. Thank you very much. That was Rob Allen, and I'm Dr. Lorena Nessi for CCN. Thank you, Rob, for joining us, and thanks everyone for watching.